There's an expression in politics that says, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, then it's a duck. And that's kind of what Jesus is saying in today's gospel. John the Baptist is in prison, and he hears about the things that Jesus has been doing. So he sends two of his disciples to ask if Jesus is the one to come, or should we look for another? In response, the Lord says, "Tell John what you hear and see. The blind regain their sight. The lame walk." Of course, it would have been much easier if he would have just said, "Yes, I'm the Messiah." But instead, he quotes the prophet Isaiah, who wrote extensively about the calamities that God's people would have to endure and the one who would come to deliver them. Last week, we heard that this Messiah would come from Jesse's stump, which means the line of King David, and that the Spirit of the Lord would rest on him. This week, Isaiah tells the people some of the signs that they'll witness so that they'll recognize when the time is at hand. But as so often happens, this reading skipped ahead, and probably most of us haven't read the 8 chapters that were covered between what we heard last week and what we're hearing today. If we had, we would know that right after John called the Pharisees a brood of vipers, and then told the people that the one who would come after him would baptize them in the Holy Spirit, that in the very next verse, Jesus shows up to be baptized by John. And that's important because right after the baptism, the sky opens and the Holy Spirit descends, and they hear God's voice come from heaven saying, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." What followed that is his preaching, his teaching, and curing the illnesses as he traveled. In Matthew's 4th chapter, it says his fame spread to all of Syria. Then he gave the Sermon on the Mount. He cleansed the leper. He healed a centurion's servant. He calmed the storm at sea, drove out a few more demons, healed a paralytic, restored the sight for 2 blind men, drove out another demon who was keeping a person from being able to speak. And if that wasn't enough, he gave his disciples authority over the unclean spirits and then sent them out to drive those spirits out and cure every disease and illness. So when it says that John had heard about the works of Christ from prison, he probably got a real earful because Jesus has been very busy in those 8 chapters that we skipped. And that's a bit of a problem, especially for those who say that they'd like to get more out of Mass. Because for a person who's unaware of all that's taken place before John's disciples show up to ask Jesus if he's the one, well, that question might sound somewhat reasonable. It's a good thing that they didn't ask me, because I've been known to be a little sarcastic. And knowing all that we know in those missing 8 chapters, this question begs sarcasm. But Jesus calmly reminded them that there was a prophet named Isaiah who lived 800 years before them, and he predicted the signs that they would see. The eyes of the blind were opened, and the ears of the deaf were cleared. I guess he thought that that was enough of an explanation for them because he didn't offer anything more. And this reveals something to us about God's nature, because he always meets our needs, but sometimes we get need and want mixed up. It's been reported that when asked what's wrong with the world, that G.K. Chesterton said, "I am," meaning himself. And what is wrong with the world? Well, what's wrong with me, meaning all of us as individuals, is that we too often seek to satiate our own wants rather than be satisfied with the things that we need. As a result, God has supplied more than enough resources for everyone in the world. But the reason that so many go without is because some want more than what they need. And in their accumulating more and more of their wants, it actually deprives others of what they need. Now, today's gospel reading knowing all that had already been done, when John's disciples approach and ask Jesus if he's the one, he could have said, "What else do you want?" But that wouldn't be his way. That would be more like the way the devil acts. He comes to us and he takes advantage of our brokenness and asks us, "What is it that you really desire?" Then, if that'll draw us away from God, he uses our wants and desires to tempt us and then twist them into overindulgence, and that often leads to gluttony. If you want to know more about that, you have to read today's bulletin. But by contrast, Jesus sees our brokenness, and then he gives us what we need to become whole so that we can enjoy the freedom that he won for us on the cross. Now, we are well into the season of Advent. It's a time when our wants and our needs actually come together because we both want and need to experience the joy of this season. This is why we're wearing pink today. Gaudete means rejoice, and so we should. So what is it that we have to do to get the most out of this season of preparation for Christmas? The simple answer is we need to enjoy every bit of it. By that I mean both the secular and the religious. Religious activities are tried and true methods that help us to grow closer to God. But along with that, we actually need to participate in the parties. We need to enjoy the magic of a good light display. Sing songs about Rudolph and Frosty. And then maybe even watch some entertaining Christmas movies like the first Die Hard with Bruce Willis. I know, just kidding. See if you can smile and laugh during Advent. These activities, while they're secular in nature, contribute to this season's holiness because we set them apart just for this time of year. And as such, they become part of our preparation to celebrate the Lord's birthday. Did you know that in the Caribbean, they don't make a cake for the child that's having a birthday? Family and friends take hands full of baking flour and they throw it at them. In Canada, they hold the celebrant down while their friends rub butter on their nose. And in Switzerland, parents hire a scary clown and the birthday child gets to put a pie in the clown's face. The point being that every culture takes the basic framework of celebrating a birthday and then they add their local customs to make it better for them. We Americans sit on Santa's lap, we decorate trees, and we have a little bit of eggnog. And it's true that temptation to overindulge is greater at this time of year than any other time, but even that can be turned to our spiritual benefit if we use this as a time to practice the virtue of temperance and self-control. When is the opportunity greater than now to enjoy the pleasures of food and drink while practicing moderation? And that's even when the food is epic and the company is great. What other time offers us the Christmas rush with all its frayed nerves as a chance to practice patience? In our second reading today, St. Paul spoke of the need for patience and not complaining about one another and making our hearts firm because the coming of the Lord is at hand. And I know that we probably wouldn't want that to refer to something more apocalyptic than the way we behave on Black Friday. But the God that we believe in, the one that we're waiting for, is so big that he sees even our smallest efforts to please him and to grow in holiness. For this reason, it's important that we make this a very joy-filled Advent. And that's as a way of knowing and acknowledging that he is the one and that we don't need to look for any other.